You know, I once thought that I actually favored the kind, mild-mannered kind of girl, kind of like Ayaka, but then Hoyoverse decided to release Yelan, and then of course everything changed when
When
the
the
Fire
Fire
Nation
Nation
attacked.
attacked.
Actually though, it kind of changed back when May became hot, you know, HOT, Hurt Your Thunder, but in reality, Yelan pretty much really awakened that entire time you have attitude deep inside me. So it makes sense that I would go absolutely feral towards Thelema. Hey, listen, she can tie me up, take my wall, and spit in mine. Thelema is the newest Ice Damage Valkyrie being added to Honkai Impact 3rd in version 7.4, boasting a brand new mechanic in tandem with the Astral Ring system, and completely changing gameplay from the team rotation-centric style like we've been used to towards one that's more self-centered focused and fitting for her dominatrix aesthetic. With all that said and done, my name is Jayniro, and I'll be your Pepega Twitch streamer guide towards how to build and play Thelema in Honkai Impact 3rd. So, Arlecchino just released in Genshin at the time of this video coming out, and Clorenne just got revealed as well alongside Jade and Starrail. So, what's wrong with another Dommy mommy that can turn you into her own personal plaything? I mean, just look at how she treats Songchui. I want to be those hands, and in those hands too. Despite her gameplay seeming like the most straightforward thing ever, Thelema's kit actually took me about 3,000 years to read. But it's okay though, because after reading 87 Yu-Gi-Oh cards each the length of a master thesis, I can finally return from the hyperbolic time changer and be reunited with my one true love, the trash can. You know what they say, right? You are what you are, or something like that. I don't know. I'm not good with words, man. Being the pure embodiment of lust that she is, Thelema plays around her meter called Banquet Enjoyment, which feeds into her special attack, Moment of Indulgence, where she indulges in BDSM, chaining me up and turning me into Fufua during Everlasting Flames. She can gain up to 6 stacks of Banquet Enjoyment through a variety of means that can grant her bonus damage, including by committing tax fraud. Just kidding. Don't commit tax fraud unless you want to be bonked on the head by the IRS. Her sequence 3 basic attack, combo attack, and weapon skill all give her 1 stack, but they each vary in the amount they give. So you may be asking yourself then, well, Jay, why don't I just spam the option that grants the most damage? And I'll tell you,
no.
This is because Thelema actually deals more damage by alternating between these different methods. Ideally, it's fastest to go between N3 and tapping weapon active. The only sadder thing than the time it takes to generate these stacks though is the fact that Thelema isn't real and I can't become her plaything. What is real though is that it takes significantly less time to build these during Stellar Outburst, which brings us to her Astral Ring. When Thelema enters Stellar Outburst, she comes protected by the Destiny! Listen, I'm hyped for the final shape. Leave me alone, alright? I just want to string up enemies and make them hot and cold like Thelema makes me, bro. While this Astral Ring specialization is active and Thelema's on the field, Thelema turns into Sung Jinwoo, turning her teammates into her own Phantom Army.
Correct.
Attempting to swap to one of these phantoms instead casts Rondo in the Shadows, which makes Thelema's attacks summon phantoms to do bonus damage, boosts her attacks that generate Banquet Enjoyment, and lets Thelema restore Banquet Enjoyment faster. In fact, while this is active, each generation of Banquet Enjoyment generates 2 stacks instead of 1. This means on average, Thelema can cast 4 Moments of Indulgence within the span of Stellar Outburst. On top of it, each cast of Moment of Indulgence during Stellar Outburst reduces the cooldown of her ultimate by 3 seconds, up to 3 times per ultimate cooldown, which finally brings us to her ultimate. Okay, I don't know the lore behind Thelema yet since I haven't played her event and character quest yet, but oh man, did I realize how insane she is when I read and saw her ultimate. Her ultimate lays out chains all over the battlefield and entraps the enemy while Thelema uses them as trampolines to bounce around in every which way and, I quote, ravage enemies before finishing them off. Hoyo's words. Not mine. Although, listen, I'd let her ravage me and finish me. Her ultimate grants time frozen domain and pauses all skill and stage timers, but it also deals 35% more ice damage during Stellar Outburst, and restores 10 SP for every character turned into a phantom in addition to the cooldown reduction passive I mentioned earlier. Now, as you may have noticed, there isn't any way to actually take Thelema off field during Stellar Outburst, and she restores Astral Ring intensity the fastest out of all of her teammates. Like I said at the start, Thelema is extremely selfish and doesn't really want to be swapped off the field, meaning there really isn't a rotation for her. But that doesn't mean you can just face roll your keyboard and mouse and expect to gain the highest possible scores. Occasionally you're going to want to swap Coralie or Helia back onto the field to reproc their buffs, but for the most part Thelema is going to remain on the field 99% of the time as a DPS. Now she can also function as a support or sub DPS character, specifically when Senadina is on the team and is the leader. Thelema's additional passives let her synergize with Senadina primarily, but more generally with Valks that have the World Star specialization. Specifically, they allow Thelema's Moment of Indulgence to enhance the entire team's total damage by 6% for every teammate with World Star, and make enemies take 8% bonus total damage for 25 seconds. Additionally, when World Star is activated, every World Star team member grants the team 10% bonus total damage outside of Stellar Outburst, reduces the cooldown of Stellar Outburst by 5 seconds, increases total damage by 6% in Stellar Outburst, lets Thelema deal bonus damage with Moment of Indulgence in Stellar Outburst, which also counts as a resistance attack, and heals the team, and also boosts Elemental Reach by 10% with it. Additionally, it lets Thelema's QTE turn her into Kuching during Stellar Outburst. In Senna's team, Thelema will take the place of either Helia or Coralie depending on the enemies and follow the same rotation discussed back in my Senadina guide, which you guys should also go and check out just in case. With all that said and done, it's on to page 3 of the script to finally discuss her gear. The amazing thing about Thelema is that we have a new weapon type with her chained blades. The not so amazing thing though is that there aren't any alternatives other than the new craftable versions, which to be honest are a lot better for all the new weapon types than all the previous weapon types before lances with doo-doo. Okay, so every time I go to read up on these gear descriptions, I realize that it'd be better to be sent to the Shadow Realm than reading these Yu-Gi-Oh card level descriptions, and that I also have Stockholm Syndrome at this point. Banquet Rose is going to be Thelema's best weapon option, and rather than read every single line of text word for word to you all, I'm going to summarize it into why it's more amazing than her midriff, which is impossible. Just want to lick it, bro. This weapon grants her and the team a lot more damage through multipliers. But the killer is the fact that with this weapon, Thelema actually grants time frozen domain for 3 seconds after her ultimate ends. This is absolutely huge because it means Thelema gains an additional Moment of Indulgence during Stellar Outburst. In a world where the timer in battle drops faster than my GPA because, well, GD&T is hard and stupid and annoying, it can mean all the difference between you securing that spot in Myriad and getting booted down to Red Lotus. Now, her Stigmata set also falls into that boat, but luckily it's completely craftable with Part 2 and much easier than Part 1 Stigs to craft. The T, M, and B Stigs all grant additional ice, total, and elemental damage, and also additional boosts to these when both Wheel of Destiny and World Star are activated. The same goes for the 2-piece and 3-piece set effects, while additionally letting Thelema further synergize with Senna by granting the Share a Glass effect, causing enemies to take 30% more total damage. Now, this works in all situations, but I found that while working towards this, the Ana Shariak G4 set is actually pretty decent as well, despite dealing only 80% of the damage when Thelema is the damage dealer specifically. Needless to say though, that trying to craft these will alleviate the stress of trying to pull them, but if you get them while going for a weapon, it's an even bigger plus since you get to save source prisms in the long run. Not only if Holio would make them more plentiful for us so we aren't penny pinching in game as much as we are in real life. Just know that while I may have gotten 32 million damage in a single rotation with Thelema, your results might vary depending on not just your gear investment level, but also your teammates as well. So let's go ahead and talk about that just a second. Okay, so I'm going to try something a little bit new with this section. I'm actually not going to be reading off of a script for this. I'm going to try to just ad-lib it and see how it goes. So primarily for the teammates that we're looking for, as we all know, we typically want to stick with the parts that our characters are coming from. So being Thelema is from Part 2, she's more than likely going to want to stick with the Part 1 teams. So we're talking with Helia, Coralie, and of course Senadina, and more than likely in addition to Lantern coming next patch, but we don't know exactly for sure yet. Honestly, we have no clue. They haven't revealed any information for us on Lantern other than the fact that Lantern is coming. But as far as her Part 2 teams are concerned, we're looking at primarily Senadina and Coralie. This is because it actually allows us to activate the entire left side column of the damage perks on the Divine Keys, which enable not just physical damage, but also ice damage, fire damage, and lightning damage all at the same time. So we don't really need to worry about the right side column, which deals with SP and additional multipliers in that sense. As long as we have the 8% for ice, fire, and lightning, that is good. Now, she can also be ran with Helia here in the third slot. It just depends on the content that you're going to be fighting, but for the most part we're going to be looking more towards running Coralie just because it synergizes well, and Coralie's buffs can get up faster through just swapping her on field, doing her twirl 3 times, or if she's at triple S, also doing ultimate right away. However, I will say there is additional times where if you swap Coralie back onto the field after that initial time, Thelema's cooldown is going to be a lot longer, so doing the triple twirl plus ultimate actually nets to be around the same amount of time that Thelema's cooldown timer is, but the first time all you need to do is either just ultimate or twirl 3 times to get the full buff from Corley to transfer to Thelema. Now, if you remember with Senadina, we did talk about part 1 teams as well, as we are fresh into part 2 and not many people really have full part 2 teams at the ready, especially if they skip Senadina, which I do think is a mistake. But we're going to be looking primarily for teammates. We're going to be looking primarily at Liu Sushang and Kira. And that's because it is very simple to proc the effects from Sushang and Kira. All Thelema will have to do is combo attack, and then you'll be able to swap Sushang on the field, EQ, charge attack. Kira will be able to then do her ult swap, simple charge attack as well to get a little bit more, like, it was like 30% damage boost from her charge attack. And the Thelema goes back on the field and stays on the field pretty much like 99% of the time, especially within this team, within a part 1 team. She is the only Astral Ring Valk, so she will be the only one that will be able to regain Astral Intensity. Needless to say, that isn't really as much of an issue as it is with Senadina, simply because Thelema regens Astral Intensity a lot faster than Senna would on her own, simply because of the fact that the Astral Ring Intensity comes from her moment of indulgence, in which she's constantly working towards that and you're using it all the time on field. So it's not as much of an issue, but it still is less damage in terms of damage output with full maxed out gear compared to a part 1 team with no signature weapon and you're still running her signature set because it's farmable. But the reason why we're looking primarily towards this part 2 team is Senadina. Senadina is very important because with this patch, Senadina actually got a new passive from her Astral Ring unlocked, which enabled her to synergize perfectly with Thelema primarily, and more than likely Lantern as well, since seeing as Lantern is also of the specialization Wheel of Destiny. It allows Senadina to actually enter the field as herself and not as one of Thelema's phantoms, and trigger the Rondo in the shadow state. And it triggers it for a lot longer, which is very important because of the fact that it enables Thelema to actually gain an extra moment of indulgence off on the field. In addition to not just that fact, it also lets her spend 30 SP, which triggers her B stake, which I talked about a little bit in Senadina's guide, but I didn't really dive into it as we didn't know much about Thelema at the time. Sorry, I apologize. It's not the B stake, but it's actually her 3-set bonus. So when Senadina actually spends 30 SP while off field, which is what happens when she actually gets used as one of the shadows and triggers the Rondo in the shadow state, she actually causes enemies to take 15% more total damage and elemental damage for 30 seconds. Which is really, really huge for Thelema, as it further boosts her damage even more on top of all the buffs she's already receiving. So it just stacks and adds up. Not to mention with the fact that she gets a essentially double timer for that Rondo in the shadow state, leads to a lot more damage being dealt. A bit of a spoiler, when I was initially testing, I actually forgot to activate that passive on Senadina. And because of that fact, every time I actually tested Senadina with Thelema, and where Thelema was the leader, I was barely getting 500 level scores, but once I activated this, I was getting above 800 level scores. This Astral Ring passive is extremely important to activate when you have Senadina on your team. Do not forget about it, because your damage will tank if you do not have this active with Senadina. In a world of constant high anticipation Valkyries coming into the game, Thelema is right up there with them. A lot of Valkyries nowadays seemingly want to be at higher ranks by default, but I'm happy to say that Thelema is very strong on her own, even at S0, which is very kind of Hoyo, seeing as to, well, how many mommy characters just recently got released and also revealed recently. Lord, please save my wallet. I still don't have Arlecchino's weapon, and I lost the 50-50 to Mona, who's now C7. Please, I want the weapon, bro. However, I just wouldn't be doing y'all justice though if I didn't talk about her ranks. For many Genshin and Star Rail players, it seemingly becomes a question of C1 or E1, or R1 or S1 of the weapon, or light cone. For Thelema though, while her S1 acts as an upgrade to her Astral Ring boosting multipliers, her S2 is actually cracked. After ulting, it restores all Banquet enjoyment for every stack restored, increasing the damage dealt of Moment of Indulgence by her attack. Meaning, it becomes possible to completely nuke enemies more than my bank account after going for E2 S1 Acheron. Her S3 is her leader skill increase, and her double S lets the hold version of her weapon active increase the amount of Rhyme Trauma it deals, and also increases her teammates' damage when on or off field during Stellar Outburst. Double S1 further increases the damage she can deal to shields. Double S2 increases her own ice and total damage further while Astral Ring is inactive, and also towards Biotype enemies specifically. Double S3 is her second leader skill increase, and Triple S straight up lets her deal 10% more ice damage and then 30% more damage for the next 6 attacks that restore Banquet enjoyment after using Moment of Indulgence. So this brings up the age-old question in this case of, do I get S1 of her weapon or S2 in her ranks? In all honesty though, her weapon is far more worth it than her S2. Fitting, as people probably are used to getting the ranks or eidolons or constellations more than the weapons, and we see them, their tears crying now in the background. Sorry, weapon is more important in this game. The equipment banner has a pity of 60, while the character banner has a pity of 90. Not to mention the amount of effects that come from her weapon passives are absolutely massive and game-changing. However, I will say that if you somehow manage to get an early double Thelema, then, well, that's a huge pog, because that's S2 right there from just a single copy. And if you're looking to save money and that happens to you, I'd say skip out on her weapon for now, since the stigmata are farmable themselves. But overall, her weapon provides far more value than her ranks do, as every character has gone for a long time, unless your name is Horb, where she pretty much needs S2 to function in all honesty. So let me know then if you guys managed to pull Thelema, or if she pulled you rather with her rope as she did me. And if you enjoyed the video, a like and sub to the channel would give me a moment of indulgence as well.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
With that being said, all my socials are down in the description below. And again, sub to the channel, follow your boy over on Twitch, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Maybe post-graduation? I don't know, but oh yeah, I'm finally graduating, so hooray. Yes!